The rain battered the windows of our suburban home, a relentless drumming that matched the storm brewing inside me. I stood in the living room, staring at the phone in my hand, its screen glowing with a missed call from Street. Mary's hospital. My father, Edward, was dying. Stage 4 lung cancer, the doctors had said, and his time was measured in days, maybe hours. I hadn't seen him in months. Not since Laura, my wife of 15 years, had drawn a line in the sand. "You're not going," she said, her voice sharp as she stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. Her auburn hair was pulled back tightly, her green eyes flashing with a resolve that had hardened over the years. "Your father's a drunk, Tom. He's been nothing but poison to you. You're not dragging our family back into his mess." I clenched my jaw, the phone trembling in my grip. "He's my father, Laura. He's dying. I need to see him." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You think he cares about you now? After all those years of neglecting you, humiliating you? He didn't even come to our wedding. Tom, he doesn't deserve your goodbye." Her words stung, each one a dagger coated in truth. My father had been a flawed man, a charming, larger-than-life figure when sober, but a wrecking ball when drunk. My childhood was a patchwork of his broken promises, missed baseball games, forgotten birthdays, nights spent waiting for him to stumble home. But he was still my father. And now, he was slipping away. "Laura, this isn't about him deserving anything," I said, my voice cracking. "It's about me. I need closure. I need to say goodbye." She shook her head, her expression unyielding. "You go to him, and you're choosing him over us. Over me. Over our kids." She gestured toward the staircase, where our 2 children, Emma and Lucas, were asleep in their rooms. "They don't need to see you fall apart over a man who never cared." Her ultimatum hit like a punch to the gut. I wanted to argue, to scream that she couldn't dictate my grief. But the weight of her words held me back. Laura had always been the anchor of our family, the one who kept us steady when my own doubts threatened to pull me under. She'd been there through my father's relapses, through the late-night calls from bars, through the shame of cleaning up his messes. She'd built a wall between us and him, and I'd let her, because it was easier than fighting. But now, standing in the dim glow of our living room, I felt that wall cracking. "I'm going to the hospital," I said quietly, grabbing my coat from the rack. Laura's face darkened. "If you walk out that door, don't expect me to be here when you get back." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. The rain outside seemed to roar louder, filling the silence between us. I wanted to turn back, to beg her to understand. But something deep paraprimal need to see my father one last time pushed me forward. I opened the door and stepped into the storm. The hospital was a sterile maze of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. I found my father's room on the 3rd floor, the door ajar. He lay in the bed, a frail shadow of the man he'd been. His once broad shoulders were hunched, his skin sallow, tubes snaking from his arms to machines that beeped rhythmically. His eyes, the same hazel as mine, fluttered open as I approached. "Tommy." His voice was a rasp, barely audible over the hum of the equipment. I pulled a chair close to his bedside, my throat tight. "I'm here, Dad." He reached for my hand, his grip weak but desperate. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. I wasn't the father you deserved." Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that I forgave him, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of years unspoken between us. We talked for hours, halting, Painful words about the past. About the good moments buried beneath the bad. He told me about his regrets. His love for my late mother. His pride in me despite his absence. It wasn't absolution, but it was something. When the nurse came to check his vitals, she gave me a sympathetic look. "He's comfortable now," she said softly. "But it won't be long." I nodded, my chest aching. I stayed until dawn, holding his hand as his breathing grew shallower. When the monitors flatlined, I didn't cry. I just sat there, numb, as the nurses moved quietly around me, preparing to take him away. When I got home, the house was dark. Laura was in our bedroom, her suitcase half-packed on the bed. She didn't look at me as I stood in the doorway. "He's gone," I said, my voice hollow. She paused, her hand stilling on a folded sweater. "I'm sorry," she said, but there was no warmth in it. I meant what I said. "Tom, you chose him." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but exhaustion overwhelmed me. I slept on the couch that night, the sound of rain still echoing in my ears. The days that followed were a blur of arrangements, funeral plans, calls to relatives, and a growing distance between Laura and me. She moved through the house like a ghost, speaking only when necessary. Emma and Lucas sensed the tension, their usual chatter subdued. I kept my grief private, burying it beneath the tasks of organizing my father's final farewell. The funeral was set for a gray Saturday morning at St. Paul's Church, a place my father hadn't stepped foot in since my mother's funeral 20 years ago. I stood at the front of the chapel, greeting mourners, my eyes scanning for Laura. She'd promised to come, for the kids' sake, but her presence felt like a concession, not support. As the service began, I took my seat in the front pew, Emma and Lucas on either side of me. The casket was closed, a mercy given how frail my father had looked in his final days. The priest's words washed over me, a drone of comfort I couldn't feel. My mind kept drifting to that last night in the hospital, to the things my father had said, the weight of his apologies. Then, halfway through the service, a woman I didn't recognize stood up from the back row. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and a quiet dignity, clutching a small envelope. She approached the podium, her steps measured, and the room fell silent. "My name is Margaret," she said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "Edward was my brother, and I have something to share with you all, something he wanted you to know." I froze, my heart pounding. My father had never mentioned a sister. Not once. Margaret's words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The chapel, already quiet, seemed to hold its breath. I stared at her, this woman claiming to be my father's sister, her face a mix of resolve and sorrow. Laura, sitting a few pews back with her arms crossed, caught my eye. Her expression was unreadable, but I could feel her skepticism radiating across the room. Margaret adjusted her glasses, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the envelope. "Edward and I hadn't spoken in decades," she began, her voice carrying a weight that demanded attention. Not because of anger, but because life pulls people apart. But he reached out to me a few weeks ago, when he knew the end was near. He asked me to come here today, to share his truth with those he loved. I shifted in my seat, Emma's small hand gripping mine tightly. Lucas, usually restless, was still, his eyes fixed on Margaret. The mourners' neighbors, old co-workers, distant cousins leaned forward, their curiosity palpable. My father had been a private man, his past a locked box I'd never fully opened. Now, it seemed, that box was about to be pried apart. Margaret pulled a letter from the envelope, its edges worn, as if it had been handled countless times. "This is from Edward," she said. He wrote it for his son, Tom. My name in her voice sent a shiver down my spine. But he wanted it read here, in front of everyone, so you'd all understand who he was. She began to read, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. To my son, Tom. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. I don't know if I had the chance to tell you everything I wanted to in that hospital room, but I need you to know the truth about me. Not the man you saw, the drunk, the failure, but the man I was before, and the man I tried to be. My throat tightened. I could feel Laura's gaze boring into me, but I didn't look back. Margaret continued, her words painting a picture of a young Edward the First barely recognized. He'd been a dreamer, she said, a man who wanted to build things, bridges, homes, a family. He'd met my mother, Clara, in his 20s, and they'd planned a life together, one filled with love and ambition. But then came the war of Vietnam and Edward came back changed. The bottle became his refuge, and it cost him everything, his dreams, his marriage, his relationship with me. He loved you, Tom. Margaret read, her voice breaking. He hated himself for failing you. He wanted to be better, but he didn't know how. When Clara died, he lost the last piece of himself that believed he could be. Tears stung my eyes. I'd heard fragments of this story from my father in the hospital, but hearing it now, in front of everyone, made it real in a way I hadn't expected. Emma sniffled beside me, and I squeezed her hand, trying to stay strong for her. Margaret paused, glancing at me before continuing. There's something else, she said, her tone shifting to something heavier. Edward wanted you to know about the promise he made to Clara. When she was dying, she asked him to protect something for you, Tom. Something she left behind. He kept it safe. All these years, even when he was at his worst. My heart raced. Protect something. My mother had died when I was 10. Her illness swift and merciless. I barely remembered her. Just flashes of her smile. Her gentle hands. What could she have left behind? Margaret held up the envelope. It's here, she said. But Edward asked that I give it to you privately. After the service. He said you'd know what to do with it. The room buzzed with whispers, but I barely heard them. My mind was spinning. What could be in that envelope? And why had my father never mentioned Margaret, or this promise, before? I glanced at Laura, expecting her to meet my gaze, but she was staring at the floor, her lips pressed into a thin line. The service continued, but I was barely present. The priest spoke of redemption, of forgiveness, but all I could think about was the envelope in Margaret's hands. When the service ended, the mourners filed out to the cemetery for the burial. Laura lingered, her expression guarded as she approached me. What was that about? She asked, her voice low. A sister. A promise. Why didn't you know about any of this? I don't know, I admitted, my voice hoarse. He never told me. She shook her head, her eyes narrowing. This is exactly why I didn't want you near him, Tom. He's still causing trouble, even from the grave. Her words cut deep, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not when I was still reeling from Margaret's revelation. I followed the procession to the cemetery, the rain starting again as we gathered around the grave. The casket was lowered, and I tossed a handful of dirt onto it, the finality of the act settling like a stone in my chest. Afterward, Margaret approached me, the envelope in her hand. Tom, she said softly, can we talk somewhere private? I nodded, leading her to a quiet corner of the church hall. Laura watched us go, her expression a mix of suspicion and resignation. I didn't know what was in that envelope, but I knew it would change everything. Margaret handed me the envelope, her eyes searching mine. "Your father loved you," she said. "He was broken, but he loved you. This is what he wanted you to have." I took the envelope, my fingers trembling. It was heavier than I expected, as if it held more than just paper. I didn't open it, not yet. I needed time, space, to process what was happening. Margaret gave me a small, sad smile before walking away, leaving me alone with the weight of my father's final secret. The church hall was emptying out, the hum of condolences fading as mourners drifted toward their cars. I stood in the corner, the envelope burning a hole in my hand. Its worn edges and faint ink stains hinted at years of careful keeping. A relic of my father's life I'd never known. Laura was across the room, talking to Emma and Lucas, her posture stiff. She hadn't approached me since Margaret's revelation, and I wasn't sure I wanted her to. Not yet. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket and stepped outside, the cold air biting at my face. The cemetery was quiet now, the rain reduced to a drizzle. I found a bench under an old oak tree and sat, my breath visible in the chilly air. My fingers itched to open the envelope, but something held me back, fear. Maybe, or the weight of not knowing what I'd find. Finally, I pulled it out and tore it open. Inside was a letter, written in my father's shaky hand, and a small, tarnished key taped to the bottom of the page. My heart thudded as I unfolded the letter, the words blurring slightly in the dim light. "Tom," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone." And Margaret kept her promise. I don't know if I said enough in the hospital, but I need you to know about your mother's gift. She left something for you, something I swore to protect until you were ready. It's in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, downtown. The keys with this letter. I know I wasn't the father you needed, but I kept this promise. At least. I hope it helps you understand her, and maybe me, a little better. Love, Dad. I read it twice, then a third time, my hand shaking. A safety deposit box. My mother's gift. My mind raced with questions. What could she have left that was so important? And why had my father, a man who'd lost everything to his demons, held on to this one thing so fiercely? I tucked the letter and key back into the envelope, my thoughts spiraling. I needed to go to the bank, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in that box would unravel something bigger, something that might change how I saw my parents, my past, even myself. When I returned to the hall, Laura was waiting by the door, her coat buttoned up, the kids already in the car. "You're keeping secrets now?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "What was in that envelope, Tom?" I hesitated, the weight of her question pressing against the fragile thread of our marriage. "It's a letter from Dad," I said, "and a key to a safety deposit box." Her eyes narrowed. "A key? For what?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "He said it's something Mom left for me." Laura's face softened for a moment, but then the hardness returned. "Your mother's been gone for 30 years. Tom. Whatever it is, it's not going to fix what he broke, or what you're breaking now." Her words stung, but I didn't argue. I was too raw, too overwhelmed. We drove home in silence, the kids' quiet chatter in the back seat the only sound. That night, I lay awake, the key on my nightstand, its presence a quiet challenge. Laura slept with her back to me, the space between us wider than ever. The next morning, I called the bank and confirmed the safety deposit box was still active, registered under my father's name with me as the secondary holder. I told Laura I was going to check it out. She didn't try to stop me, but her silence was louder than any argument. First National Bank was a gray stone building downtown, its lobby echoing with the clack of heels on marble. A clerk led me to the vault, where I presented the key. My heart pounded as she retrieved the box and set it on a table in a private room. It was small, no bigger than a shoebox. Its metal surface scratched, but intact. I opened it slowly, half expecting something dramatic, a stack of cash, a family heirloom. Instead, I found a bundle of letters, a small velvet pouch, and a photograph. The letters were in my mother's handwriting, addressed to me. The photograph showed her and my father, young and smiling, with me as a toddler in her arms. The pouch held a simple silver locket, engraved with my initials. I opened the first letter, my hands trembling. "My dearest Tom," it began. "If you're reading this, you're grown, and I'm gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to see you become the man I know you'll be. These letters are for you, to tell you who I was, who your father was before the world broke him. I want you to know you were loved. Always." Tears blurred my vision. I skimmed the letters, each one a piece of my mother's heart stories of her youth, her love for my father, her hopes for me. The locket, she wrote, held a piece of her hair, a keepsake she'd made when she knew she was dying. She'd entrusted it to my father, believing he'd keep it safe until I was ready. I sat there for what felt like hours, reading, crying, piecing together a mother I barely remembered. My father, for all his flaws, had kept this promise. He'd guarded her gift through years of chaos, a quiet act of redemption I'd never known. When I left the bank, the weight of the box's contents felt heavier than the metal itself. I drove home, unsure how to face Laura, unsure how to bridge the gap between us. But I knew one thing: these letters, this locket, were a tether to a past I needed to understand and maybe a way to heal the present. The drive home from the bank felt endless, the letters and locket tucked safely in my jacket. My mother's words echoed in my mind, each sentence a brushstroke painting a woman I'd only known through fragments of memory. She'd been kind, fierce, hopeful, a stark contrast to the broken man my father had become. Yet he'd kept her gift safe, a silent vow that complicated the resentment I'd carried for years. When I walked into the house, Laura was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a precision that felt like a warning. The kids were at school, and the silence between us was suffocating. I set the bundle of letters and the locket on the counter, the photograph of my parents and me tucked beside them. "What's all this?" Laura asked, her knife pausing mid-chop. "Mom's letters," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "And a locket. She left them for me. Dad kept them in a safety deposit box all these years." Laura's eyes flicked to the items, then back to me. "So, what? You're going to spend the rest of your life chasing ghosts? First your father, now your mother." Her tone was sharp, but I heard the hurt beneath it. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Laura, this isn't about chasing ghosts. It's about understanding who they were, who I am. I need this." She set the knife down, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "You need this. What about what we need? Tom, Emma and Lucas deserve a father who's here, not lost in some dead man's regrets." Her words hit hard, but they also sparked a flicker of anger. "I'm right here," I said, my voice rising. "I've always been here. But you can't keep me from my past. You don't get to decide what I need to heal." "Heal?" She laughed, a bitter sound. "You think digging up old letters is going to fix what your father did to you? To us. He was a drunk who abandoned you, Tom. And now you're letting him ruin our family. That's not fair," I snapped. "I went to see him because he was dying. I didn't choose him over you." I chose me for once. Laura's face hardened. You chose him the moment you walked out that door. And now you're choosing this. This obsession with your mother's letters over us. The argument spiraled, our voices echoing through the house. We'd fought before, but this was different. Jagged, like a wound that wouldn't close. When the kids came home, we plastered on smiles, but the tension lingered like a fog. That night, I retreated to the study, spreading the letters out on the desk. I read them one by one, each a window into my mother's life. She wrote about her dreams of being a writer, her love for my father's wild spirit, her fear when his drinking started to consume him. She wrote about me, how she'd watch me sleep, how she prayed I'd grow up strong despite the chaos. The locket, she said, was her way of staying with me, a piece of her I could carry always. As I read, I began to see my father differently. He'd been broken, yes, but he'd loved her fiercely, and in his own flawed way. He'd loved me too. The letters didn't erase the pain, but they gave it context, a story I could hold on to. The next day, I tried to talk to Laura again, hoping to share what I'd learned. I found her in the living room, staring out the window. Laura, I began, holding up a letter. These aren't just words. They're my mother. They're helping me understand. Understand what? She interrupted, turning to face me. That your father wasn't as bad as we thought. That doesn't change what he did, Tom, or what you're doing to us. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to yell. I'm not doing anything to us. I'm trying to make sense of my life. Can't you see that? She shook her head, tears in her eyes. All I see is you slipping away. You're so caught up in this. You're not even here for the kids anymore. Her words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. I'd been distant, consumed by the letters, by the past. But I couldn't let go of it yet. I need you to trust me, I said. Just give me time to figure this out. Laura didn't respond. She just walked away, leaving me with the letters and a growing sense of dread. Over the next few days, I kept reading, piecing together my parents' story. One letter mentioned Margaret, my father's sister, and how she'd tried to help him after my mother's death. It explained why she'd been a stranger to Mimi. Father had pushed her away, ashamed of his failures. I reached out to her, and we met for coffee, her gentle presence a balm to my raw emotions. She told me stories of my father as a boy, of the family they'd lost to time and distance. It wasn't closure, but it was connection. Meanwhile, the rift with Laura widened. She stopped talking about the letters, stopped asking about my day. The kids noticed. Their questions about Grandpa and the funeral met with vague answers. I wanted to fix it, to bridge the gap, but every attempt ended in silence or sharp words. By the end of the week, I'd finished the letters. They left me with a mix of peace and longing. A clearer picture of my parents, but no easy answers. I knew I had to confront Laura, to find a way forward. But the weight of her ultimatum still hung over us. The funeral had revealed my father's secrets, but it had also exposed the fragility of my marriage. I wasn't sure what was left to savor if I could. The house felt like a battlefield, each room charged with unspoken accusations. Laura and I moved around each other like strangers. Our interactions reduced to logistic school pickups, dinner plans, the bare minimum to keep the family running. The letters and locket sat on my desk, a constant reminder of the past I was unraveling and the present I was losing. I wanted to reach out to Laura, to share what I'd learned, but her walls were higher than ever. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I found her in the living room, scrolling through her phone. The glow of the screen cast shadows across her face, highlighting the lines of exhaustion and resentment. I took a deep breath and sat across from her, the locket in my hand. "Laura," I said softly, "can we talk? Really talk?" She looked up, her eyes wary. "What's there to talk about? Tom, you've made it clear where your priorities are." "That's not true," I said, my voice steady but pleading. "I'm trying to understand my past so I can be better for us, for the kids. These letters, they're not just about my parents. They're about me. About why I am the way I am." She set her phone down, her expression softening for a moment. "And what about us? You're so buried in those letters. You don't see what's happening here. Emma asked me yesterday why you're always sad. Lucas thinks you're mad at him. You're not here. Tom." Her words cut deeper than I expected, because they echoed my own fears. I'd been so consumed by my mother's words, by my father's redemption, that I'd neglected the people who needed me most. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I didn't mean to pull away. I needed to know." Laura's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was firm. "You needed to know more than you needed us. I told you not to go to him. Tom, I warned you what it would do to us. I couldn't let him die alone," I said, my voice rising. "He was my father. Flawed, broken, but mine. And these letters theory proof he wasn't all bad. He kept my mother's promise. He loved me, in his own messed up way." Laura stood, her hands clenched. "And what about my love? Our kids' love? You're throwing it away for a man who hurt you and a woman who's been gone for decades." The argument escalated, our voices filling the house until Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. "Stop fighting," she cried, her voice trembling. "Why are you always fighting?" We froze, guilt washing over us. I went to her, kneeling to hug her tightly. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I whispered. We're figuring things out." But as I held her, I realized we weren't figuring anything out. We were breaking apart. That night, Laura slept in the guest room, and I lay awake, the locket heavy in my hand. I knew I had to make a choice, not between my past and my family, but between holding on to my grief and fighting for my future. The next day, I called Margaret again. She met me at a park, the autumn leaves crunching under our feet. I showed her the locket, told her about the letters. She listened quietly, then placed a hand on my arm. "Your mother would be proud of you," she said. "But she'd want you to live for the people who are here, not the ones who are gone." Her words hit like a revelation. I'd been so focused on understanding my parents that I'd lost sight of my own life. I thanked Margaret, promising to stay in touch, and drove home with a new resolve. I needed to fix things with Laura, to show her I was still here, still hers. When I got home, I found Laura packing again, not just clothes this time, but photo albums, keepsakes. My heart sank. "Laura, please," I said, stepping into the bedroom. "Don't do this. We can work this out." She didn't look at me. "I don't know if we can. Tom, you've changed. Or maybe you've always been this way, and I just didn't see it." "I'm still me," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "I'm just trying to make sense of everything. But I love you. I love the kids. I don't want to lose you." She paused, a photo album in her hands. "Then prove it," she said quietly. "Put the past away. Be here, with us." I nodded, tears in my eyes. "I will. I promise." But promises, I knew, were fragile things. That night, I put the letters and locket in a drawer, vowing to focus on my family. I started small, helping Lucas with his homework, reading to Emma before bed. Laura watched, wary but softening, and I clung to that hope. Yet, as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. The letters had given me peace, but they'd also opened a door to questions I hadn't asked. What had my mother wanted me to do with her gift? And could I truly let go of the past without losing myself? Weeks passed, and I poured myself into repairing what I'd nearly broken. I was fully present for Emma and Lucas, coaching Lucas's soccer team, helping Emma with her art projects. Laura noticed, her guarded looks softening into cautious warmth. We weren't healed, but we were trying, and that was enough for now. Still, the drawer with my mother's letters called to me, not with the urgency of before, but with a quiet insistence. I resisted, focusing on the present, until one evening when Laura found me staring at the closed drawer. She didn't speak, just sat beside me on the bed, her hand resting lightly on mine. "You're still thinking about them, aren't you?" she asked, her voice gentle. I nodded, unable to lie. Not like before. But they're part of me, Laura. I can't pretend they're not. She was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "I don't want you to pretend. I just want you to choose us, too." "I am," I said, squeezing her hand. "I promise." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "Then let me in. Share it with me. Don't carry it alone." Her words were a lifeline, a bridge across the chasm we'd built. That night, we sat together, and I read her the letters. I told her about my mother's dreams, her love, her fears. I showed her the locket, the photograph, the pieces of a life I'd never fully known. Laura listened, her tears falling as she held my hand. When I finished, she leaned against me, her voice soft. "I'm sorry I made you choose. I was scared off losing you, of what your father's pain would do to us." "I'm sorry too," I said. "I should have let you in sooner." We didn't fix everything that night, but we started rebuilding. The letters became a shared journey, not a solitary one. I showed them to Emma and Lucas, too, carefully explaining their grandmother's love, their grandfather's struggles. It wasn't easy, but it was honest, and it brought us closer. I visited Margaret again, this time with Laura. We talked for hours, piecing together my father's life, his regrets, his quiet acts of redemption. Margaret gave me an old journal of his, filled with sketches and notes from his sober years. It was another piece of him, another thread in the tapestry of my past. As winter settled in, I felt a shift. The grief was still there, but it was lighter, shared. The locket became a symbol not of loss, but of connection to my mother, to my father, to my family now. I wore it sometimes, a reminder of the love that had shaped me, flawed as it was. One evening, as snow fell outside, Laura and I sat by the fire, the kids asleep upstairs. She looked at me, her eyes warm in a way I hadn't seen in months. "You're different," she said. "Not better or worse. Just whole." I smiled, pulling her close. "You made me whole." The funeral had revealed more than my father's secrets. It had exposed the fragility of my marriage, the depth of my grief, and the strength of my love. It had forced me to face the past, not to dwell in it, but to carry it forward with purpose. My wife had banned me from my dying father's side, fearing it would break us. She hadn't expected what the funeral would reveal, that even in loss, there was a path to healing, a way to honor the past while building a future.